All right, so to start, it will just be easier if I move the layers palette here so that you can see the contents of the layers palette. I'm going to drag it by the title. And once you take the layers palette and move it by the title, you want to dock it in that area. You're going to see a blue rectangle indicating that it will be docked in that area. So here it is, and here's my layers palette. And then I'm just going to go and expand that space so that we can see more of the layers palette in general. So I'm going to unlock the background. And I'm going to duplicate the layer, and we know now one method to duplicate the layer, which is right-clicking somewhere here and selecting duplicate layer. So that's one way to do it. But I want to mention a shortcut related to that, and that shortcut is the following. Since I do not have a selection in my file now, I can highlight layer 0 and use the shortcut Command J. So Command J as in jump. So if I click Command J, that will make a copy of the layer, and then I can double click at it and I can rename it. So the layer we're going to use now, I'm going to use the clone stamp. That's the tool I'm going to use to make few changes to the image. But I want to show you a time when you should not use Command J. So we mentioned earlier in the course, if you have a selection like this and then you use Command J, which I did now, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up duplicating only the pixels that are selected, which is something we do not do. If you want something like this, we use a layer mask to get that result. So we copy the whole layer, we use the selection to create a layer mask. We don't use Command J to do this. This will end up copying just the pixels that you selected and not the rest. So I'm going to undo that step because I don't want to do that. I'm going to click Command D. So the rule is the following. If you want to use Command J to duplicate layer 0, be sure you don't have a selection on your screen. So for example, I don't have a selection now. If I select layer 0 and click Command J, then I will get a copy of the whole layer. All right, so I'm going to undo. Go back to the new layer I made, which is called Clone Stamp Tool. So that's the duplicate of layer 0 that I'm going to work with. And then I'm going to zoom on the face, and we're going to start working with the Clone Stamp Tool. The shortcut for the Clone Stamp Tool is the letter S. So if I click S in my keyboard, it will highlight this tool. Again, this is the Clone Stamp Tool. There are a few things I need to do before I'm ready to start working with the Clone Stamp Tool. The first one is to adjust the diameter of the tool, or the diameter of the brush. And I can do that using two methods. I can go to the top section of my screen here. This is the tool options, and I can click and increase the size. So that's one way to do that. However, there's a faster way to do that, which is a shortcut, and that shortcut is the brackets in your keyboard. So the left and the right brackets, they are located in your keyboard right after the letter P. And you can basically use one of them, the right bracket, to make the brush bigger, and the left bracket to make the brush smaller. Every time you click at the right bracket, it will increase. Every time you click at the left bracket, it will decrease. Again, in your keyboard, these two keys are located right after the letter P. All right, so we looked at a couple things now, couple shortcuts, and then we're going to start using the Clone Stamp Tool to see how to apply changes to it. But let's write these shortcuts first. All right, can I use the shortcut Command J to duplicate a layer? The answer is yes, as long as what? As long as you don't have any current selections. It's really important that you keep that in mind. Otherwise, if you do have selections, it will only duplicate the selected pixels, which is a destructive edit. Shortcuts. S is the shortcut for the Clone Stamp Tool. The brackets are the shortcuts to decrease or increase the brush or the tool diameter. So now we've seen the shortcuts we talked about earlier. We have also them written in the notes. Now, if we go back to Photoshop, I have the Clone Stamp Tool. So how do I use the Clone Stamp Tool? First, you need to define what is it that you want to add or remove. So let's say I want to remove this wrinkle here. That's what I'm trying to remove. Second thing is you want to make the diameter of the brush suitable for that. So the brush that I had earlier was quite large, so I'm going to make it smaller just to fit kind of over the width of that line. That's a good size. And then the third step is to define where do you want to clone from. So basically the tool works by cloning from one area of the image and painting over another area of the image. So if I look at that photo, I can say, all right, the area right above it could be suitable, or the area right below it could be suitable to clone from. So let's try. So you hold down the Option key, and when you hold down the Option key, you're going to see what looks like a target sign. So the tool interface will switch from that circle to a target sign, and you simply click once. And once you click once, you let go of the Option key, and now you can start painting. And notice when I'm painting, there are two icons in my screen at the same time. The plus is what I am cloning, and the circle is what I'm painting at, what I'm covering with the clone. So let me do this one more time. I'm going to go here. I'm going to hold the Option key. Notice I'm having the Option key now and click once. Just click once. Then I have to let go of the Option key and go here and start painting. And then basically I'm repeating that to get the texture or the results basically of the photo. I'm trying to keep an eye on the different tones on the photo so that I can get the same tones as I'm painting. So if I continue, I can copy from below it now. I can go in and paint this like that. So again, Option, click, and paint. So your process when you're using the clone stamp tool is to carefully decide, again, what is it that you want to remove. So I want to remove this detail. What is the best place to copy from, underneath it or below it? What's the correct size of the brush? That looks like a good one. And then hold the Option key and click, and then start painting. And then hold the Option key again, click, and start painting. So you're basically going over the photo and repeating that process over and over again. Option, click, and then paint, Option, click, and then paint, and going on. So if I continue doing this a little bit more, you can see that I can just basically go slowly over all the wrinkles in that photo, and I can remove most of them. All right, so let me stop here for a minute, and I want to just kind of show you before and after. So here's before, and here's after. Like that's before and after the changes that I've done with the clone stamp tool. Okay, let me show you errors I don't want you to achieve, I don't want you to do when you're working with the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to duplicate that layer just to show you the errors, and then I'm going to delete that duplicate after because that's intentionally making the errors. So I'm going to highlight the clone stamp tool, and now you know the shortcut to duplicate that layer. Since I don't have a selection, I can use Command J. So here's Command J. And again, I will delete that layer in a minute. So one of the errors is to not notice the textures and the difference in brightness and texture from one area over the other one. So if I hold the Option key down and click here, notice that area is bright. If I hold the Option key down and click here, and then go to that area and start painting to remove this wrinkle, notice that I got a very bright area over that part. Not only this, when I started painting, I accidentally crossed over another wrinkle, so I got a copy from that wrinkle. So not being aware that there's a difference in brightness and texture between this area and this area will cause this to look off. Another thing that is not going to be correct to do is to go really close to something you're trying to remove. So let me zoom in here to show you what I mean by that. Like I'm going to go and I want to remove this wrinkle, so I'm going to go really close to it like that and hold the Option key and click. And then I'm going to start to paint, and what you're going to do is you're going to accidentally get another copy of it right underneath it. So here's the wrinkle I tried to remove, and when I did that by going really close to it and started painting, I actually accidentally get another copy of it. And what happens often when you have this is you keep chasing it, you keep clicking right next to it, and you start painting again, and you get a little bit more. And by the time you finish all of this, you basically copied the same area 3 or 4 times like that. So notice here's 1, 2, 3, 4, exactly same pixels copied 3 or 4 times in a row. It doesn't look right, it looks fake. It kind of shows right away that somebody was trying to fix something and they didn't do it properly in the photo. So what are the 2 errors we talked about? Not noticing the difference in brightness and texture from one part over the other one. So if we go here, for example, and say, I want to remove this. Now let's look at the proper way to do it. The proper way is to look around and see what's a good area. So that's a good area to copy over here. So click S for the clone stamp tool, and then don't be really, really close to it. Use all the space that you have and do that. Now let's kind of explain why if I'm really close to something, I'm going to end up getting another copy of it when I try to clone stamp it. The answer is this, is that if I hold the Option key and click here, and then go here, I'm going to hold the Option key here to copy the texture between these 2 wrinkles, click, and then go over this one and start painting. If I make the brush diameter much bigger, you're going to see what's actually happening. What Photoshop is doing is Photoshop is basically shifting the whole picture slightly lower based on the difference in position that I've done. So if I undo, that's the original image, and if I redo, that's the edited image that I've done here now. So that's basically what you're doing when you're clone stamping. When you hold the Option key and click, what Photoshop is doing is literally copying the whole layer to the memory, and now as you paint, you're painting from that whole layer. So eventually, you're going to get the same detail that you are trying to paint out if you are really close to it. All right. So that kind of explains the errors that I want you. Like notice, again, this doesn't look right at all. The changes that I've done here are not correct compared to this one, which looks natural before and after. It should look very close to being natural at this point. So I'm going to go to this layer and I'm going to delete it because that layer is not correct. I'm going to go back to the layer called Clone Stamp Tool. And there are a few things to discuss. So for example, again, like we're developing the eye for how to do clone stamping properly. You might say, well, this section is slightly dark. And yes, it exists in the original photo. Like if I go back and look at layer 0, that section is quite dark in the original photo. So should I keep it or not? Well, when you remove the wrinkles, if you think that looks a little bit off, you can now go and say, all right, maybe I can try. We're not sure if it's going to look good or not. I'm going to highlight the layer called Clone Stamp. I'm going to click S again for the Clone Stamp tool. I'm going to make the diameter of the tool a little bit smaller. I'm going to hold the Option key. And I'm just going to go and try to apply this brightness over here. So again, just to show you, this is slightly lighter than this. So I'm trying to apply that here. I'm trying to clone from here over there and see if that would look better. So this area is surrounded by different tones. Like this is one tone, this is another tone, this is another tone, this is another tone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to copy as much of this and this a little bit as much as possible. When you are clone stamping, I want you to be sure you give yourself some time to try things and see if it makes sense, because it's not gonna look great on its own. Like you have to be patient, you have to try a few things, you have to see what's the right texture to use in an area until you get the result that you want. So I'm kind of like I think this is good for now. Like what I've done here is good starting point, and then I'm just gonna go back and clone from few areas, just kind of couple touches here and there to remove this. So let me show you before and after. This area was darker and I made that area now slightly brighter. Now, again, as I mentioned, it's not a matter of right and wrong. Like I don't really like the changes that I've done 100%. I can undo them. It's a matter of you deciding what you like versus not in the photo. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to continue working with the Clone Stamp tool, just so to remove more and more of these details here that we want to get rid of the image. And then I'm going to go back at the end and I'm going to show you the final result in the video. And I'm doing that here now, like just again, couple times to show you the process. You are going back and forth between holding Option and clicking and then painting over an area, holding Option and clicking and painting over an area. You're adjusting the diameter using the square brackets as needed. So that's your process. It's a continuous back and forth between holding the Option key and clicking to paint, and then going and also adjusting the diameter of the brush if needed to get these areas kind of not to show, and to be sure you're choosing the right texture. Any change you make that doesn't look right, undo and think, okay, how do I approach that in a way that will look right in that case? So before I stop recording, this is what we did so far. We've changed that part like that. And then I will stop recording, and when we come back, I'll show you the remaining changes that I've done. I'm going to remove a few more as well of the wrinkles in that photo.
They say, oh my God, I see the way you shine. Take your hand, my dear, and place them both in mine. You know you stopped me dead while I was passing by. And now I beg to see you dance just one more time. Ooh, I see you every time. And oh my, I like your style. You make me wanna cry. And now I beg to see you dance just one more time. So they say, dance for me, dance for me, dance for me, oh. I never seen anybody do the things you do before. They say, move for me, move for me, move for me, hey.
All right, so if we look at the end result, here is after finishing a bit of work with the Clone Stamp tool. So here's before, and here is after. And I recorded actually what I was doing so that you can see the process. Sometimes I had little space to work with, like for example here, there was very few spaces to work from, so I was cloning from that middle area over here and there. or underneath it because the lines were too close and I couldn't copy from other areas because the texture was different. Sometimes it was easier, I had more space, like for example something like that, I had all that space to work with. So when you watch the speed up video of what I was doing, you're going to find that some areas were a bit harder, like something like that, just because there is a bit of a small space around to work with. Some areas were a bit easier because there is more space to work around with, like the wrinkles here. So here is, again, if I zoom back just on the face, here is the starting point, and here's the end point after using the clone stamp tool.